Hey everybody, Kenny here. In this video, I'm discussing my assassin build for the game Stranger of Sword City. Now, in case the name of the video kind of threw you off, there is no class in Stranger of Sword City called Assassin. I just refer to this particular combination of classes as my assassin build. Just wanted to put that out there. So, what is an assassin and how do you put one together? When I was coming up with this character, my entire idea was just a character who could hit for a tremendous amount of damage from any row and any position, but it did not require any particularly high defensive abilities in order to make an impact. So the idea here is that you have your assassin hiding in the shadows until it's time for them to pounce. And I'll get into what that setup is and what the kind of core components are. First off, like all of my builds, I highly recommend leveling the first class until at least level 30 before your first class change. Reason for this is you don't want to be too short on points, especially if you didn't choose to min-max the character during character creation. So if they only started with, let's say, 10 or less skill points to attribute during character creation. Going up to 30 would allow you to get agility, strength, and some vitality up to a decent amount. If you have extra points to allocate, like you may want to go into luck. Luck isn't particularly useful, but since this is a character that is going to be doing the majority of its damage using skills from stealth, you're going to want to be able to get the highest crits you can get, which is where luck plays a role. Not a tremendous role, but it can help. Now, when creating your assassin, there are two routes that I recommend. I recommend either starting as a ninja or a fighter. In this case, I obviously started as a ninja, but a fighter might actually be the better option just because in this case, we're not really using any of the fighter skills with the exception of wielding heavy blades and using the heavy swing skill when in a position where hiding isn't really time effective. However, the skills from ninja are incredibly valuable and do occupy a lot of the skill slots for this build. And because they occupy more than fighter, I personally recommend starting with fighter and then ending on ninja instead of doing it the reverse like I did. It definitely is not efficient this way. If I had gone for the full 25 points in agility, I could have eliminated the dual wield penalty altogether. But I wanted this character to have at least 18 vitality, and I wanted them to have some points in luck. And as a Nay, they are already pretty good on strength, vitality, and agility. So it wasn't a tremendous investment to get them there. However, don't think that you have to go with an A in order to do this build. Every race has its pros and cons. So you could do an elf assassin, a human assassin, even a dwarf assassin. I don't personally recommend the Migmi assassin just because the starting strength with a Migmi is pretty low. Although the same could be said for a dwarf assassin. Dwarf assassin would also start with very low agility, which would be quite detrimental to a starting point. But, like whatever you prefer is what you should do. If you want to have all of your party slots taken up by dwarves, then make a dwarf assassin. Nothing wrong with that. But let's go over the skills that will be coming over from ninja. Of primary importance, obviously, is the assassination skill. Assassination serves a dual purpose. The first is that it passively allows you to enter combat already hidden, and then actively allows you to hide if you enter the combat out of stealth. But so long as you are hidden, you can use the assassinate ability, which has a very high chance to hit and does very good damage. Next up is critical daggers, which is a very important passive for this build. What critical daggers does is that every single hit that is performed has a chance to be multiple hits. So if you're using a weapon that hits one time, then critical daggers will cause that one hit to become 3 hits. If it's a weapon that hits 2 times, then critical daggers will increase it to 6 hits. It's an incredibly powerful passive. After that, we have our evade training, which is only on here because in the cases where this character is not hidden, which there are areas where you cannot use skills, and in those areas you will have to use your basic attacks and will have no way of performing any active skills. So having something like evade training for those situations is definitely useful. Also cicada shell, which is one of the big reasons why I believe that that ninja should be where you end at, not where you start at. There's just too many useful skills in ninja for this character. And finally, we have critical. Critical is the ultimate skill in the ninja class progression. What it does is the longer you go in combat while hidden, the more damage critical will do when used. So if you're hidden for 1 round, then hidden will do a certain amount of damage. If you're hidden for 2 rounds, it'll do quite a bit more damage. Hidden for 3 rounds, quite a bit more. At 5 rounds, critical does an insane amount of damage. So that's what you want to aim for. Using Assassinate for as many rounds as you can before unleashing critical. And it's undodgeable. Now, that doesn't mean that the enemy you're fighting can't perform a defensive maneuver. So let's say you're fighting a big hulking enemy. A lot of them will do something like this enemy tensed its muscles and reduced the damage by half, or this enemy hardened its scales and reduced the damage. Things like that will still take effect, so you can't get around that, but no enemy will be able to avoid the damage, which is important. Once reaching level 30 as a ninja, perform our first class change into a dancer. This starts us off at level 15 dancer, and the main reason for this class change is for the weapon trick skill, which allows our ninja to use any weapon from any position and attack any enemy in any position on the other side. So your backline ninja could hit a backline enemy with a short range weapon, which makes this class sing. At 15, this character also has access to Sword Song, which you can use, but I've had very mixed results with that. I've tried having an entire party with that ability all use it in the same round and found that a high damaging party builds morale much faster and doesn't have the potential threat of actually reducing your morale. And of course, we want to have our level 13 skill slot. I took this character up to level 16 dancer. There aren't any skills at level 16 to learn, but by going to even levels, each class change lets you start just that little bit higher, which is useful. And since we did our class change from ninja at 30, that's only 1 level to invest into dancer. So it's not a huge investment. And you don't have to do it. Like if you want, you can go straight from dancer into knight because you'll have all the skills you want from it anyway. It's just that as a knight, you'll start at level 7 instead of level 8 if you don't get that 1 level. So once we perform that class change into knight, the whole reason we're here is for secret defense. Aside from evade training and sometimes cicada shell, when you feel you can afford it, secret defense is the only defensive passive in this build. Its purpose is simple. If this character takes a hit, we want to make certain that it's not a critical hit, because when enemies crit, they do the same amount of damage that you do, sometimes more. You can be hit for over 1,000 damage by an enemy, and having over 1,000 health requires investment, so keep that in mind. So knight, we want to get all the way up to 21 to get secret defense. You can go up to 22 just so you start at level 11 samurai, but if you don't want to spend that time, which honestly anything over level 18 is a pretty big investment, especially if you aren't going to the much higher level areas. So 21, 22, up to you. But yeah, but we're only using knight for secret defense and for the skill slot. Next up, we change class into samurai, where we want to go all the way up to level 18 for /2. But the main purpose of samurai is to get the dual wield skill, and of course our next skill slot. With dual wield and weapon trick, this character is now capable of using assassinate for very high damage. From there, we go into ranger and level up only until level 13, just for our skill slot, and also to potentially equip hunter's eye if your party build just doesn't happen to have anyone else who could spare a slot to have that skill in, which you always want to have it just so you can see how much health an enemy has. Though that area that I mentioned earlier where skills can't be used, Hunter's Eye counts in that category of skills that can't be used. So even though it's a passive skill, it still will not activate in combat to show you your enemy's health, which is unfortunate. And then our final class change into fighter. As a fighter, this character will have access to a large arsenal of weapons and even able to equip heavy armor. The issue with that though is that heavy armor has attack penalties. So you'll be less likely to hit if you equip heavy armor, which is another reason why I recommend just starting with fighter and ending with ninja, just because equipment wise, the only thing of real value in fighter is giving ninja the option to equip heavy blades like axes. Axes are the hardest hitting weapons in the game. There are very strong katanas that you can find later on, but the really strong katanas you won't see until post-game. And I don't recommend waiting until post-game to try to put together a good character. Though, to be fair, and I've said this in my leveling guide, you don't need to level up past level 30. The game is balanced to let a level 30 team get all the way to the final boss. So there's no need to do all this. It's just fun for me. And this particular build is pretty easy to put together. It's not as easy as my Zephyr Blade build, but it ranks pretty close. Fighter also has a large assortment of concentration abilities. So you use your concentrate, then on the next turn you could use a skill that attacks multiple times, which is very strong, but as a character who has the assassinate skill and is able to attack from any position and can dual wield, it's not that good. And I have a build that's set up around using the fighter skills, but it requires far more investment than the assassin does. And defense wise, the only skill to take out a fighter for this build is the Invincible Heart skill. This gives your character the chance to survive a powerful attack with 1 HP, which you can improve the chances of by defending. The only active skill that I recommend using from fighter as an assassin is Heavy Swing. Heavy Swing is outrageously powerful when dual wielding. It has a lower chance to hit, but since this is a build that revolves around having very high agility, you most likely will get a hit off on most enemies that don't have very high evasion, which is why I recommend this as the skill you use anytime you enter a battle that you know won't escalate too high to require you to spend rounds trying to hide. Anytime you enter an encounter with this character stealth, you should just use assassinate. But if you happen to enter combat with this character out of stealth, then Heavy Swing is what I recommend for any not potentially dangerous situations. Let's check out the gear that I equipped this character with. As I said, axes are the strongest weapon, and the strongest axe that you can get early on is the broad axe. So dual wielding 2 of those will give you the highest potential damage at this point in the game, which here what you're seeing is about halfway through the game. I chose this as the point where I wanted to create these characters, though holding off until much later would let you do it faster. But I am just the kind of person that I like making really strong parties early on to kind of like beast my way through the game. So with 2 of these axes on, as you can see, I've reduced this character's potential hit chance by 2 as the penalty for using these axes. There are axes that you will find later on that are much stronger and do not have that penalty. But prior to those later game dungeons, this is the strongest weapon you will be able to come across. Along with that, I'm wearing mostly assassin gear, which provides both increased hit chance and evasion. For underwear, I have this character using Revealing, which once again offers both hit chance and evasion, and then a strength ring in order to increase their potential damage. I have very bad luck when it comes to finding good rings, so this unfortunately is the best strength ring that I was able to give this character. Now let's see the assassin in action. Equipping /2 from the samurai allows this character to help out cutting down large groups. Now, if this is a situation where there's one strong enemy in the group that you want to make sure goes down first, potentially because they can deal a tremendous amount of damage or are capable of a debuff that you don't want to hit your party, or if it's just a ambush situation where they're the loot boss and you need to make sure that they die before they run away, then in those situations, obviously we're going with our big hits. But when that's not the case, there's no reason not to use /2 just to help out with wiping out lesser groups of enemies. When that's not the case and you need to focus down a single enemy, then as I said before, you want to focus on our assassinate. You entered the combat out of stealth, then focus on hiding until you can assassinate. If the situation where you need to do it as fast as possible, then break out the heavy swing and start laying in that way. It's always good to have casters on your team to be able to perform hit buffs and evasion debuffs on the enemy to increase your likelihood of hitting with heavy swing. As you can see there, does a tremendous amount of damage, and assassinate, while not doing as much damage as heavy swing, is still respectable. But now let's see what happens when we use our critical. So first off, let's see what a single round critical looks like. Alright, damage. Hold off for 2, much better. Hold off for 3. As you can see, the longer you go, the greater the reward. You can very easily have an assassin take out a lineage on their own if it's a combat where there are many adds around that need to be focused down before going after the lineage. That's a great opportunity to build up assassinate to be as deadly as possible. And that's it for this build. Thanks for coming by. I hope that if you are planning to get into Stranger of Sword City, you consider making a character in a similar build to this, as it can be tremendously helpful on your journey. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.